Welcome to Rasa Chats. I am Rachel, and today I'm going to be talking with Alex, who works on a project that I think is particularly interesting. And Alex, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So my name's Alex, and I'm a full stack developer working with a company called Ample Labs. Now, Ample Labs is a nonprofit empowering those of us facing homelessness using technology. And our flagship product is Chalmers. And Chalmers is an artificial intelligence powered chatbot that makes it easier to find social services like free meals, shelter, clothing banks, and more in the city of Toronto. And actually, we've now launched as well in the city of Hamilton recently, which is very exciting on both desktop and mobile. Um, so I'm here to chat today about our Chalmers product.
And just for folks who are, it'll be in the show notes, but if you wanted to look it up now, it's Chalmers, Chalmers, right?
Correct, yes, Chalmers. And you can find us at chalmers.amplelabs.co as well at chalmers.app.
Fantastic. And we'll post those links as well for folks who want to check out the project. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and you mentioned that you've been with Ample Labs for about a year now. And so the decision to make this particular project a chatbot rather than, say, a visual, button-based interface was made before you actually joined. But I would be really interested to hear what you know about that process that led you to create a chatbot for this particular application.
Absolutely. So a little bit of background on Chalmers. Our CEO, CG, who designed and founded the product, was working in the product design and user experience field when a friend of hers actually experienced homelessness and needed to crash on her couch. And at the time, she was working with another friend of hers to help find services, and they found it very difficult, not only through trying to Google for services, but also reaching out to different phone services like 211, and that they wanted an easier way to find something that was available right now. And they thought, well, I think leveraging artificial intelligence is a great way to do this. And so there's a lot of research and a lot of interviews that went into determining what the best platform was for delivering that. But what was determined was that a lot of those of us experiencing temporary homelessness still have access to our cell phones. It's one of the last things we hold on to. And so really being able to deliver a service through a cellular device was actually an avenue that hadn't been explored very much, and it was an opportunity for us to really make an impact. And so chatbot was one of the natural ways we thought of how to interact with your cellular device and receive this information.
Yeah, definitely. I think it can sometimes be surprising to folks who have been lucky enough not to experience homelessness that it is so common to have a cellular device. But if you think about it, you need that in order to, apply for jobs. You need to have a phone number more than you need a physical address these days, or a way to check your email. And certainly in the United States, we have public libraries where you can use computers, but they tend to be very slow. They usually don't have many computers, so you'll have to wait to have access to the internet, which, if you think about all the things that you do in the day on the internet, is a very necessary part of modern life, particularly if you're doing things like trying to access resources or jobs.
Absolutely.
So you are a full stack developer. You've worked on the project for about a year, and I'd be really interested to learn more about some of the challenges that you faced during development and also deployment. And let's actually just start with the development, because I think that's a very rich vein to work.
Absolutely. So, one of the struggles with development is we want to make all of the services available, basically. So everything that you could find. So I should note that our data partner is 211. And so 211 in Ontario is providing us all of our data for where these services are located and the eligibility and availability of these services. But one of our challenges is we wanted to make all of these available on our chatbot, but there is quite a bit of work involved in training a chatbot to understand a new intent. And when we're looking at offering currently it's 6 services, but we were hoping to expand to something closer to 46. And as you increase the number of services, you also run into conflicts where um, certain things that users might say that may seem to the developer that they should point towards one intent may get picked up by another, and other conflicts. And so as the bot grows, the complexity significantly increased. And so that was one of the challenges that we're definitely are working against as we're growing Chalmers, laterally in terms of the amount of services we're offering.
Yeah, which I think brings up a problem that lots of developers, including me working in the space, have run into, which is when do you know to add a new intent, and when do you know that you need to add more training data to an existing intent? And it sounds like you've added a lot of different functionality to the assistant as it's been in production. So, what sort of litmus test do you use to say, okay, there's something we're not capturing currently in our sort of intense things that we want our assistant to do, time to add a new one?
So what we did at this point is we really wanted to make sure that we had a product that was tackling the most needed services. And so when after interviewing the community, we determined that services such as food banks, free meals, shelters, crisis lines, and clothing banks were really the most important and most requested services. And so for us, there was a logical breakpoint as to those were really each individual intents that a user had to search out each of those individual services, because of the way that those flows worked, that each would be delivered very differently anyway. And that was how we kind of made the determination, is that if an intent got to, if the way that the bot was to respond to that intent differed greatly because of the way the service was delivered, then at that point it made sense to create another intent rather than to overcomplicate the existing one.
Yeah, so more of a, I'm just to paraphrase what you're saying. So, talking to your users and making sure that you were meeting them where they were at, and then also sort of on more of a, I don't know, sort of larger scale architecture consideration, focusing on functionality that you are adding because it was requested, and then at that point extending your assistance
Absolutely.
ability.
I mean, absolutely. I think one of the most important things for us is co-design and making sure that we're really listening to the community. And the fact that those services, we were able to really atomically break them down into, these are 6 different intents that our users wish to receive help with, that it was very easy to logically break them down that way. As the app grows, that may no longer become a feasible way of managing it, and so it's definitely something we're constantly looking at. How can we better optimize that process?
Yeah, no, definitely. It sounds like there's a lot of moving parts, and also it's important that you get it right, because this is a population that needs very
So,
immediate help.
absolutely. So the first and most immediate concern for us is that we're delivering the correct information and that we're responding correctly to the query. And so one of the reasons that the current amount of services we're offering is really limited to these 6 is that we were able to very critically test that those services worked. But as we expand, it's really a matter of resources to make sure that we can properly test the entirety of the bot as we expand throughout. Like I said, going from 6 to 46 services, for example, that's quite a few intents to develop and ensure complete accuracy. For example, you wouldn't want, if you wanted to add small talk to the bot, something to respond to a user being appreciative, but you also had an intent that dealt with a user maybe suffering from depression or chronic illness, you wouldn't want it to mistakenly respond with one intent over the other. And so there's definitely, we definitely take those concerns into consideration and make sure that we test it quite intensely.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so I definitely also like the strategy you're discussing, where you're very conservative in adding new intents, which I think um, makes a lot of sense for this particular application. Like if I were building, like a fun shopping which raincoat are you sort of quiz, I can add additional intents, and the penalty for me getting something wrong is like, oh, maybe someone doesn't buy a raincoat. Oh no. But if you don't provide somebody like a link to the mental health services that they need in that moment, then that's worse. That's much worse.
Absolutely.
So our audience has a lot of developers in it. So I'm curious, what sort of tooling are you using for your deployment?
Absolutely. So uh, I think, as I mentioned earlier, our chatbot's hosted on Lex, and
Mm,
so a lot of our tooling is related to AWS services.
mm,
And it's one of the reasons that we had actually leaned towards Lex originally,
mm,
being that we were already heavily invested in AWS, and that the one of the big pluses for us was just being able to expand. So scalability is a big
mm.
concern for us, but being very much a volunteer-based workforce, I was actually the first employee that was brought on in November.
Oh,
Um, we wanted a solution that we could maintain and scale with very little overhead, and so
mm.
AWS has provided us that. Now, sorry, just to get back to the question there.
Yes.
Sorry, Rachel, could you
Oh no, I was just asking about sort of like general tooling.
general tooling?
Yeah.
So, I mean, our chatbot's a Vue app and that would be the single page application that our users to
Mm,
connect that our Lexbot connects to. Um, in terms of deployment, we're able to do a lot of our configuration right in the Lex console.
mhm.
However, we do have some scripts to automate updating utterances and adding new intents, um, and we do that using the AWS library.
Yeah, it sounds like you're. I think it makes sense if you're very invested in a particular ecosystem to maybe keep using that ecosystem. I can definitely. I've been in situations where the cost of switching would have been too high, very very high.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we looked at solutions like Rasa, for example,
Mhm,
and it was very attractive in the sense that we would be able to really from scratch configure a product that, um, like I had spoken to earlier, one of the things that was important to us was the fact that the way certain intents would end up delivering responses could be
mhm,
very different. And so Rasa provided out of the box a very configurable solution.
mhm.
Um, I think where we started to lean towards Lex again was our heavy investment already in our AWS services, and
Mhm.
the fact that we were able to scale those functions very easily.
Yeah. And feel free not to answer this if you would prefer not to. But is Amazon providing you with funding as well, or compute resources? The nonprofit.
As a nonprofit, we have received some funding for Amazon through different accelerators, and so I'm not sure if Amazon has directly provided us with any funding at this point.
Yeah. Also, definitely, Rouse of course does not do the hosting, so you still have to find a place to serve from. And just
Absolutely.
I'm curious. Do you know ballpark how many sessions a day Chalmers is getting?
Absolutely. So we're up to about 1,500 sessions a day
Oh,
at this
wow.
point, um, and growing rapidly. So that number was about 1,000 um, in early July.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that can be attributed to our launch in Hamilton, which is very exciting. Now, sadly, part of that could also be attributed to the fact that we are in a climate where many people are now out of work, and so um, while we're very excited about our growth. We're also very cognizant that it does mean that there are more people that are now looking for services as well.
Mm-hmm.
So so yeah, but it's about 1,500 users on a regular basis now.
Yeah, that's um, it's not good. There are that many people that need help, but it is good that you are able to help that many folks.
Now I should point out that
Mm,
um, it's not just people that are experiencing those of us that are experiencing homelessness
mhm,
that would actually use Chalmers. So some great use cases is that the police force in Barrie has actually greatly adopted Chalmers, so they can actually access
mm,
Chalmers right from their vehicle, which means now when they are trying to help somebody find these services, they don't have to call dispatch. They can now find services right in their vehicle and help people really right away. And it's been great to see the adoption in the Barrie Police Force, and I'm hoping to see that as we expand to other municipalities. But really, service providers and first responders have actually greatly adopted Chalmers as well. And so, I it does make up a percentage of those users as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. So you have a variety of stakeholders.
Absolutely.
And just a sort of a little bit of an off-topic question. I know that Canada is a very multilingual country.
Yep.
So I poked around with Chalmers a little bit, and I, of course, use the English version. Do you support other languages? French, maybe, First Nations languages?
So we're currently working on implementing language support for a number of different languages.
Mm-hmm.
So French definitely is on that list. I believe that we're going to also include some First Nation languages, as well as Spanish and some others. Right now, we're looking at how we can best implement that solution in a low latency way, without having to provide additional training data in those languages as well. So it's definitely something we're working on, and it's something will be coming out soon. But I don't have a date on that at the moment.
Yeah, no, of course. Once you start adding additional languages, the complexity definitely ramps up. Do you want to talk a little bit about the sort of general approach you're taking to making your system multilingual?
So right now we're looking at how we can do that in, like I said, in the lowest latency way possible. So obviously having training data in other languages would be ideal.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the most ideal way, would be to train, to have an intent duplicated for each language, and to be able to provide training data specifically in that language. With our resources, what may be more feasible is to leverage a service like AWS Translate and AWS Comprehend. And so Comprehend would be able to determine the language of the user input, and then we could use AWS to translate that, AWS Translate to translate it into US English or another language that Lex is able to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And then when returning the response to the user, also following that process. Now, we have to be very careful because, again, the translation services aren't perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and we're very focused on accuracy. And so that's really where a lot of the moving pieces are right now in determining what solution we're going to pick here. Is how can we provide the most accurate solution with the least amount of engineering overhead, is really that's what it's coming down to.
Yeah, it's if you had infinite engineers, you could make something that works perfectly in every language, but unfortunately, not usually the case. So we've talked about some of the considerations that you've made in system design, and I think multilingual assistant would count as one of those for your specific community of users, which, as we just mentioned, includes things like first responders, who are helping guide people towards resources that are available to them. What are some of the other particular things that you've thought about in your design, your development work, given your population of users?
So a lot of thought went into how can we deliver, how do we make an accessible chatbot, basically. And so what we've done is, for every step in the flow, we've also provided buttons that a user can select with common responses that will allow them to click through the flow. So if they aren't able to type or enter input that way, we've provided accommodations there. Really the first thought with Chalmers is, how do we make it accessible, and how do we make sure we're providing users with the information that they need right now. And so making sure that we provided an interface that was both accessible in the sense that you're able to click through it, but also accessible for users who may be suffering from things like anxiety. So we wanted to make sure that we kept text limited, that we were very poignant into to the result, and that we also built some empathy into Chalmers, and so that Chalmers would be able to respond to questions like, um, I'm not feeling well, I'm looking for some help, and that there would be some empathy built into the response. Now, we were very poignant also, I think, right as you enter Chalmers, that Chalmers is a chatbot, and so we don't want to confuse any of our users into thinking that they are speaking with a real person. That was very important to us. Obviously, chatbots aren't 100% perfect, and so I think it is important that people do know that they are chatting with a computer, and that it is learning over time, but it was a consideration for us definitely to make sure that that was apparent in the onset as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that we always, always, always encourage at Rasa, is that you are very upfront with your users. This is not a human that you are talking to. And you mentioned especially the sort of limiting the amount of text on the screen. I imagine that's also very helpful for people with screen readers, so they can just go through it a little bit faster and they don't have to read 18,000 button labels and like people's aesthetic characters, which I know are a huge headache.
Absolutely. I had a very eye-opening experience using a screen reader for the first time a couple of weeks ago. Our, one of my colleagues, Jordy, who heads up our user research team, had suggested that I give it a try, and it is it's quite eye-opening, and will definitely help guide some of my decisions going forward in terms of how I develop apps, because you'd just be amazed at how tough it is to navigate some websites via just an audio input. It's really tough.
Something that like looks visually very clean might, like when you're listening to it, be like blah, 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 and very, very difficult to pick out the important things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, like I said, one of our considerations is how do we make it as accessible to as many people as possible, and as well, how do we deliver the result as fast as possible and as accurately as possible?
Yeah, and that sort of brings up, at least to me, another accessibility point. So along with sort of less text being less overwhelming and faster for screen readers, it's also just less data. And I'm not super familiar with how data plans work in Canada. Is it common for people to pay by the data unit?
So it is common, yes. So many plans are limited at 2 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes. We have a bit of a monopoly. Yeah, so we have a bit of a monopoly.
That's a lot. Sorry, that face was like, ah, that's a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I've been told that in comparison to some countries, it's not the greatest here. We have there's limited selection in terms of mobile carriers in Canada, and so I think some of that we don't have unlimited plans like they would in, say, Australia, or plans that are much cheaper per megabyte as they do in Europe. But yes, that was definitely a concern of us, is how can we limit the amount of data required? And so we're also looking into how we can connect Chalmers into and make it available offline, rather via text or some other medium. And so, because we know that these users have access to the cellular device, but may not have access to internet at that given time, maybe there's no Wi-Fi. And so those are definitely considerations we're making, is how can we make Chalmers more accessible? And so definitely stay tuned for that, because it's something that will be coming in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is one of the benefits of a chatbot format, is that you can turn it into texts, and that opens it up for more folks.
Absolutely. It's one of the very exciting things about it, is that it's so easy to integrate with different platforms, and that I mean, the sky's the limit as to, and so yeah.
So before we wrap up, do you have any advice for someone who is interested in working on a similar project? So I know Chalmers is currently available in Toronto, and you said Harristown? No, that's not right.
Oh no, Hamilton. So
Hamilton.
yes, and actually in Barrie as well. So Barrie, Toronto, and Hamilton currently, and we will be launching a few other cities in the near future. Although I'm not sure whether I'm at liberty to speak to that yet. So just say that we will be expanding to other areas soon. Yes, exactly. But in terms of some advice, I think we had touched on this earlier, but I think start small. Think about really what it is you're trying to achieve, and, and what your users is, why your users intending to use your chatbot, and what they're intending to get out of the conversation, and really starting small and then growing from there. I think if you start with trying to handle too many different intents and trying to train all of them concurrently, you're going to give yourself a headache. And so really start from a base idea of what's the single most important intent that I'm trying to get to, and build from there. So if you needed an intent to handle greeting a user and then helping them determine which further intent they wanted to flow into, that's something you could build after the fact. But I think really focusing on what the core services that you have in mind is that would be my biggest piece of advice. The other thing is test. Chatbots do some funny things, and so if it could be as simple as misspelling a word in a sentence, and you'll end up getting a very interesting result. And so I think there's, as with everything, having real users testing the chatbot makes a big difference. And so we definitely take advantage of a lot of different automated testing, but that we've set up. But again, that's limited to the inputs that we've provided. And so having lots of different people interact with your chatbot in that testing phase is really important.
Yeah, for language applications, there's just no replacement for feedback from humans. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining me today. And before we completely end, I want to ask if you have anything to pitch. I know Ample Labs is hiring.
So I know right now that we're looking, if you check at our website at amplelabs.co, I do know that we have a listing of all of our active roles as well as volunteer positions. We're always looking for new volunteers, as well as looking to fill these positions. So if you have any inquiries or any other questions, you can reach us at general@amplelabs.co, or check us out at our website, and there's some information there to contact us.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully somebody in our audience is interested in working on this project, or looking to volunteer and get some experience and help some folks out. All right, thanks so much for joining me today, Alex. This has been Rasa Chats, and stay tuned for our contributor shoutouts. Thanks so much for joining us today on Rasa Chats. Before we get into our contributor shoutouts, I just really quickly want to let everyone know that Rasa 2.0 has been released officially. Yay! So we have a complete migration guide on our docs website. There's also a 90-minute webinar that we've recorded that's available on our YouTube channel that goes through all the changes and discusses the migration process. And that video is titled Webinar: Rasa 2.0 Release. If you have any questions, please take those to the forum. And if you have any issues that you run into, or if you have any fixes you'd like to propose, the GitHub is the best place for that. And we are Rasa HQ on GitHub. All right, let's get into the contributor shoutouts. If I mispronounce anybody's name, please let me know. Send me a recording of the correct pronunciation, and I will fix it the next time that I do Rasa Chats. So for code contributions, we'd like to give a shout out to Robin Gower, Alexander Miguel, Romulo Vincius de Souza, and Dingu Cigar, all for their code contributions. Thank you so much. And then for their support contributions, we'd like to give a shout out to Mohammed Azharuddin, Ashir Abdul Bashir, and Darashi Bangani Langapuli. Thank you so much all for your support contributions and helping the Rasa community. That's it for Rasa Chats this week. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Talk to you then.